Well, when people introduce themselves, usually they start out with their identity. So in this case, the proper way to say is that about my name, and I'm Danny Yong. Okay. And then the next thing they will ask you to introduce yourself is where you are from. I guess the proper thing to say is I'm from Hong Kong. And then you can keep going on and on about various issues or relationship or informations about identity.
Why are you in Berlin? What is the reason?
I'm here because I'm organizing the Festival of Vision, Hong Kong in Berlin. And that program lasts about 6 weeks. And what we are doing is bringing various Asian artists to Berlin to work with the Berlin artists and developing programs that can generate further collaboration and cooperation. And I think in some way what we are doing also is to redefine the concept of festival. And through the redefinition, maybe we can come up with a better vision for culture.
What is your vision of culture?
Openness, generosity, learning, attitude, and of course, creativity is so important. As we progress, how do we relate to the system surrounding us, and how creative can we be in contributing to the building of a better system?
What is theater to you?
It's a place for learning. It's also a place for experimentation. But of course, we all know very well that theater starts out like a mirror. So through theater, you see yourself, and then you also see what's behind you, like when you look in the mirror.
How does this view on theater differ from the old meaning of theater?
What is the old meaning of theater?
I'm asking you, I'm not a theater person.
Well, asking, you have this question, so I have to ask you, what do you mean by old meaning of theater? I only find one meaning of theater, that it's now, here, within the frame, to discuss about or explore about certain issues and certain vision. And this is what, actually not only theater, but all art is all about.
What are the 4 Grand Inventions?
The 4 Grand Inventions, in the context of the Festival of Vision, is a performing arts event which I'm in charge of. It's an opera which I developed early this year, which I'm bringing to Berlin at the Herbal Theatre. But of course, 4 Grand Inventions have many other meanings. The 4 Grand Inventions is a term which was developed during a very crucial part of Chinese history, when Chinese became very insecure and also had this kind of need of certain self-confidence. So they developed these 4 Grand Inventions reflecting their contribution to the scientific world of the progress of humanities. So the 4 Grand Inventions are the compass, printing, paper, and gunpowder. These are the 4 Grand Inventions.
Why do you think it's important to rename these 4 Grand Inventions in the year 2000 in Berlin?
Rename?
Or recalling them?
I think one thing that I've been thinking about all along in the last couple of years was the concept of the black box. As you may have known, that this is another exhibit that I brought to Berlin. The black box is an advocacy project trying to develop a dialogue with the next generation about what curatorship is all about and what the gallery system, the museum system, the art systems are all about. And then through that, maybe we can gain a new insight to the gallery system, the art system, the museum system. The black box, of course, we also know that has many other meanings. One of the meaning is that the black box is something that is part of the on the aeroplane. That only when there's a disaster, then you will recover the box, and then you recover certain part of the history to find out the truth. and you use that information to piece up the facts or to solve the riddles. And I've been thinking about this concept, and I kept thinking that in some way theater is doing the same way. Of course, nowadays we talk about the theater as a black box. So when I talk about the 4 grand inventions, I'm using the same aptitude of recovering part of our history and part of our past, and to see if we can piece the puzzle together. So maybe we can then look forward to the future.
I have read you call your 4 grand invention a multimedia opera. What is the multimedia part?
Well, the media is what you're looking at right now. The media is everywhere. How do we cope with media? The media is not now. The media is documentation. It's always in the past. How can we cope that in the theater, which is now and real? I think media is an area that we always want to tackle with. In this case, as media is providing image, sound. Multimedia means multi-layer of images and sound in an environment which you can try to recreate accessibility to question about the media and to question about the contents and approach of the media.
What do the visitors have to expect when they come to the show?
They expect to have a dialogue with me through the theater.
But they have to be quiet during the show, do they?
Well, not necessarily. I don't know.
Are they allowed to come on stage
If they make a noise, if they come on stage, I'll be interested to find out what will happen. Yeah, I'm curious about that. But this is the kind of things that we did in the 80s, redefining the boundaries and of audience-performer relationship. We did that a lot back in the 80s. Over here, especially when it's a cross-cultural exchange experience, I guess one thing that we are trying to explore is that how we can create a platform for open-ended exchange. I think in some way, when I'm questioning about history, my own history, or collective history of China, or history of Asian experience, how would that echo with the European experience or the Berlin experience? I try to incorporate, as I am still working on the whole production. As you know, in multimedia productions, you're constantly changing, constantly working, because you're constantly experimenting. So the contents and the form are constantly influencing each other. And I've been collecting lots of information in Germany as well, and in Berlin as well. I don't know, maybe it's a very superficial observation, but still my own experience here. And I guess I'm waiting to get feedback about how people see, how I see Berlin, German culture, European culture, in the context of 4 grand invention, when we deal mainly with past history and through past history looking to the future.
Talking about cultural exchange, do you think that this exchange took place until now?
No, I think in the process of preparation, first of all, we are exchanging a lot about cultural bureaucracies, and we are also exchanging a lot about cultural policies. And this is the time which, that was the time that a very interesting thing came about. You learn from each other the system and how rigid or how flexible the systems are. But I think right now, when we are here, after 2 years of preparation of the festival vision, we are talking about exchange between people to people, no longer system to system. But both of this experience are very rewarding in some way, because I also see through the process the system changes as well, and which is precisely one reason why we have cross-cultural exchange. We are trying to generate and develop new space. So by doing that, maybe we gain a little bit more additional way to ask questions and to explore for possible solutions. There is no one method of looking at one's world, but I guess the way how I look at it is that if I can be relaxed and the next moment be intense and focused, and then be relaxed and then intense and focused, this will give me angles in looking at the external world outside from me, with multi-layer and multi-angle. I guess this is what we call being dialectic. I think this is the method of looking at the world. You constantly are exploring, and then you summarize and analyze and argue, and then you challenge yourself, and then you start exploring again. Sometimes when you go through that, a lot of creative juices also come out. It's a good feeling.
Do you really believe that the form is more important than the content?
Well, I think form also have contents. So sometimes the contents of the form is very interesting, because then we will know when we read the contents how form is influencing the contents.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily like this. You can have pure aesthetics without any content.
For example, you are interviewing me, and the frame, how you frame me, and how the surrounding somehow influence the context of my response. And also when you're viewing me, whatever situation you are in, maybe you're in front of a computer, or maybe you're in a living room, or in the dining room, or in the kitchen, or what, they also influence how you read it. And I think, we have to be aware how the form is affecting the contents. And of course, this is like the media itself is also a message, but the message is also, of course, very, very important. I'm not saying that I'm avoiding the contents, but the contents must be read in reference to the form.
So my suggestion would be I just make an interview with you without speaking to you and without requesting answers, and I just show you sitting in an empty room.
That can be a very interesting conceptual work, because I don't know if that's very interesting to look at in an empty room or what. I guess we are living in a media world, and then there are certain narrative structure that we are so familiar with, and then we tend to be lazy. If people are not lazy, maybe that's what you can do. Not asking me any questions. I just sit right in front of you, and you just look at me, and I look at you, but then you know that I can't see you, but you can see me. And you know that actually I belong to the past, not the present, because when you're looking at me, it's maybe a few days later or a few weeks later. So it's not real time. Maybe that's the reason why I feel theater is so important, because it's real time, and you can really having a contact. Maybe that's why I think interactive program is so important, because then you can truly respond and relate and carry on a dialogue. And hopefully internet can do that. But we also know the technical problem of how far can we work on that. Some of the problems are not still solved yet, to make it a really interesting, interactive, intellectual discourse.
But don't you think that it's very important to preserve the footprints in the sand?
Depends on how you look at history, because whoever holds on to the camera determine the final edition of the history. I can be edited in a very wrong way. I can be edited, or my image can be transformed to something very strange. Who knows? But I'm willing to take the risk, and I'm sure the person behind me also is carry on the dialogue with me for your behalf, is also willing to take up the risk to make sure that this can be a long-term, interesting, open-ended, experimental exchange.
Would you like to be transferred into a duck?
Do I like to be transferred into a duck? I don't like to eat duck, so I don't mind becoming a duck. Shoot me another interesting question.
What do you understand stand under creative grammar and anti-grammar rules in terms of the four grand inventions?
Well, we can talk about grammar because I think if we exchange with each other, we have to use some medium. And in this case, we are using the English language. And if we do not use the same kind of grammar, there may be some gap and some misunderstanding. But experimenting the grammar also is a challenging to the form of communication. I'm not saying that we should not be speaking different language. For example, if I speak Chinese to you, you will not understand what I'm talking about. But if I'm speaking Pidgin English to you, you have other readings. But how do we tackle the language system to make us conscious of how language is also another kind of power play? I think we also know that there's a lot of grammar with the video and with the computer behavior, grammar quote unquote. Okay. For example, we know that we're influenced by commercials. So every 30 seconds, then we will say that another message is coming. And we are influenced by MTV. So every 3 minutes, we think there's another song. We are influenced by the narrative structure on television. So every 10 minutes, there must be a break. All those are influencing us. And I think, can we be more conscious of that kind of so-called quote-unquote grammar so we can cope with it? So then we will be reminded sometimes when we're impatient, it's not because we're impatient, because we are becoming part of the white rat syndrome. We are influenced by the media. And how do we cope with that? I think in many ways we are using that and bringing that in the four grand invention, the opera experimentation. How do you cope with the musical structure, for example? How do you cope with the attention span that one has in viewing an incident? What is an incident? In four grand invention, the opera that I'm bringing to Berlin, I'm trying to experiment in one scene with no performer. There's about almost 20 minutes without any performer. How far can I cope without any performer? Not that I don't like performer. I just like to see how we can cope with it. Will people get uneasy? Will people feel uncomfortable? I don't know. I'm experimenting it myself as well. Also about information, message, and presentation. We are using theater as a laboratory to explore so-called multimedia in the 21st century society, as well as how we cope with the past history of all this, the myth that has been born upon us.
Do people go to an opera in order to be entertained? And how are they entertained without any action for 20 minutes on stage?
That's a very typical question people ask, about entertainment, about do you get entertained? Are you entertained right now?
Yes.
You are entertained. Great. Because entertainment to some lazy people is repeating past experience, past safe experience with some sensationalistic tickling. Okay. For some other people, it's an intellectual exercise. It triggers you to ask questions. For some other people, entertainment means your creative juice start to come out, and after you watch a performance, you suddenly said that I want to do a performance myself, and I can do that too. And I have 10,000 more ideas than this guy on stage. Fantastic! If you can do that, it's really fantastic. But of course, nowadays, with the economic system and in the consumerism society, we know what entertainments are. It's pushing the sensationalism to a certain extent that people will just go in and relive some of the fantasy and stop right there. I think, I guess for working class, middle class, particularly for working class, I do think they need entertainment, but the kind of entertainment that let them forget about all this hard work in the daytime. But I think in due time, whichever class you belong to, we are trying to reach out to other people to carry on a truly stimulative dialogue. And that is what entertainment to me. Well, maybe this is the wrong word, because that is what how I see what we should do on stage, not necessarily entertainment. But of course, when you were talking about opera being entertainment, I don't know enough about German culture, but it seems like every German town there's an opera house. So it's sort of like a habit that this is what you do on weekend or what you do during a festival, to go to opera and to relive some operatic experience. Something similar is happening in Asia as well. I mean, similar tradition. But I look at opera, well, I don't even want to use the word opera, but the reason why I use the word opera for Grand Inventions is because I use a lot of singing, a lot of vocals in the whole work. And I also experiment a lot with different form of operatic genre from China, namely Beijing opera, which is from Beijing, Sichuan opera, which is from Sichuan, Cantonese opera, which is from Canton, and then the revolutionary opera, which was developed in the Cultural Revolution in late 60s, early 70s in China. And I'm exploring and developing or somehow experimenting all these forms of operatic form. And it's very different. To us, all these operatic forms are very different. Maybe to Europeans, they all look alike. But then, it's just like, when you talk about Italian opera versus French opera versus German opera, to you, they're all very different. And I hope that, the viewers will spot the kind of experimentation we're trying out with this different operatic form. Of course, one of the things that I did try to experiment is using some of the Western, or not Western, some of the universal lyrics, such as the Internationale, and to see if that can be done in Sichuan opera style. So we are experimenting that, and to see whether it still be Internationale if it is in Sichuan opera style. So
when you set up the 4 Grand Inventions, did you consider a target group?
The target group is myself, or the people who I'm working with. This has to be the first group. You have to do it for yourself, and then you have to say yourself it's not it's a capital self, which is in a larger scope. That you have to, if you have the compassion to share with others, it's bound to reflect other people's concern and their sensitivity. I cannot say that I'm doing this for the students, or I'm doing this for certain arts community, or doing it for certain working class. No, I don't believe in that. I think the first thing you have to be doing is really honest to yourself, something that you really have to do. If you don't do it, you feel like you are going to suffocating yourself. But once when you start doing for others, then you know that the commercialism comes in. But of course, when you do it for yourself, you also belong to a certain clique in the society. If you are more a journalistic kind of a background, then whatever you do is bound to appeal more to the journalists. And if you are more with the film buff, then then the film buff will appreciate what you do. But I try not to think about it too much. I think it's the first rule of creativity. You must be honest to yourself. Then you can be honest to others.
How do you understand the word farming, the Chinese word farming?
Well, as we know, invention in Chinese is farming, and farming literally means discovering or uncovering or recovering light. Ming is light, and Ming also can mean sun and moon. There's the character sun and moon together, which means light. And I found it so fascinating because in the biblical sense, this is the first thing that was invented or created, And so I was using that as a parallel text of in the very beginning, what was discovered or what was created or what was invented. Light is the first thing that's invented, created, and discovered.